Welcome to 7th grade math. That was a homework due a couple days ago. Mini lab. You can use a number line to model subtraction problem. 1. Write a related addition sentence for the subtraction sentence 6 minus 7. So what does that mean? Let's look at the number line. If we start at 0 and we go to 6, and then we're going to subtract 7 and we end up at -1. So if we want to write an addition problem, we can write 6 plus -7. See on the number line how that would work. We have the 6 plus a -7. Let's look at another one. Write a related addition sentence for the subtraction sentence 1 minus 5. So on the number line, we'll go from 0 to 1, and then we'll subtract 5 or add a -5. And 1 plus -5. And another one. Write a related addition sentence for the subtraction sentence -2 minus 1. So if we look at the number line and we go to -2 first, and then we take away 1. So in this case, if we want to write an addition sentence, we would -2 plus a -1. And this time we're going to write an addition sentence for the subtraction sentence -3 minus 4. So if we start at 0, go to -3, and then we go 4 more, -4, that's going to equal -7. And if we make this an addition sentence, it's going to be -3 plus a -4. And see how we have -3 plus a -4 equals a -7. And we'll write an addition sentence for the subtraction sentence of 0 minus 5. And if we have our number line, we're at 0, so we need to take away 5 or add a -5, and we end up at -5. So 0 plus a -5 is how you would write that as addition. Subtract integers and words. To subtract an integer, add its opposite. So examples, 4 minus 9. To subtract 9, we're going to add a -9. So we end up with 4 plus a -9. And then we'll simplify, it's -5. Examples, 8 minus 13. To subtract 13, add -13. So we get 8 plus -13. Simplify, -5. -10 minus 7, so we're going to add its opposite, which is to subtract 7, we'll add -7. -10 plus -7, if we simplify that, it's -17. Check your progress. 6 minus 12. 6 plus -12 equals -6. So -20 minus 15, we're going to add the opposite, so it's going to be -20 plus -15, which is -35. And then C, -22 minus 26, we're going to have -22 plus a -26, and that's going to be -48. Scaffolding questions. What direction do I move if I subtract 2 from 6? So if I'm at 6 and I subtract 2, I'm going to move left. What direction do I move if I subtract 1 from -6? So if I start at -6 and I subtract 1, I'm going to move left. What direction do I move if I add -3 to 1? So if I add -3 to 1, I start at 1 and I add -3, I'm going to go left. In what direction do I move if I add -9 to 0? So if I start at 0 and I add a -9, once again, I'm going left. Subtract negative integers find 1 minus a negative 2. To subtract negative 2, we're going to add 2 because we're going to add the opposite, right? So 1 minus a negative 2. And if we simplify that, 1 plus 2, and that equals 3. Negative 10 minus a negative 7. So remember, to subtract, we're going to add the opposite. So we're going to subtract, to subtract negative 7, we're going to add 7. So negative 10 minus a negative 7 is negative 10 plus 7, which equals negative 3. Check your progress. 4 minus a negative 12. We're going to add 12 because we're going to add the opposite. 4 plus 12 is 16. Negative 15 minus a negative 5. So we're going to add the opposite. So we have negative 15 plus 5. And that equals negative 10. 18 minus a negative 6. Add the opposite. We end up with 18 plus 6. And that is 24. Evaluate an expression. Algebra, evaluate x minus y if x equals negative 6 and y equals negative 5. So if we have x minus y, we're going to replace x with negative 6 and y with negative 5. And we end up with negative 6 minus a negative 5. And then we're going to subtract negative 5, we're going to add the opposite, which is 5. So we end up with negative 6 plus 5. And if we simplify that, we end up with negative 1. Check your progress. So we'll evaluate the expression if each expression if a equals 5, b equals negative 8, and c equals negative 9. So b minus 10, b equals negative 8. So we're going to plug in negative 8 for b. Negative 8 minus 10. And now we're going to add the opposite. So negative 8 plus a negative 10 equals negative 18. A minus b. So we're going to plug in 5 for a and negative 8 for b. We end up with 5 minus a negative 8. And we're going to add the opposite. 5 plus 8 equals 13. C minus a. C is negative 9 and a is 5. So we end up with negative 9 minus 5. And we're going to add the opposite. So we have negative 9 plus a negative 5. And that equals a negative 14. Real world example. Space, the temperatures on the moon vary from negative 173 degrees Celsius to 127 degrees Celsius. Find a difference between the maximum and minimum temperatures. So to find a difference in temperatures, subtract the lower temperature from the higher temperature. So the higher temperature is 127 and the lower temperature is negative 173. So we get 127 minus a negative 173. And we know that in order to subtract, we're going to add the opposite. So 127 plus 173 equals 300. And we can just check this with an estimate of 127 will make 100 and 173 will make 200. So if we add those together, we get 300. And in this case, that equals it exactly. So the difference between the temperatures is 300 degrees Celsius. Check your understanding. Geography. The Dead Sea's deepest part is 799 meters below sea level. A plateau to the east of the Dead Sea rises to about 1,340 meters above sea level. What is the difference between the top of the plateau and the deepest part of the Dead Sea? So if we have the highest part, which is 1,340 meters, and the lowest part, which is negative 799 meters, we're going to subtract the 799, the negative 799, from the 1340. And we know that in order to subtract that, we're actually going to add the opposite. So then we get 1340 plus 799, and the difference between the top of the plateau and the deepest part is 2,139 meters. So if we estimate this and we do 1,300 plus 800, that's 2,100. Real world applications. We have a timeline here, which is the same as number line, the lowest numbers on the left, the higher number on the right. And the diagram below is a timeline showing the lives of 3 rulers of Rome. So we have Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Tiberius. How old was Augustus when he died? So if Augustus negative 63 is when he was born, and 14 was when he died, 14 AD, negative 63 because of 63 BC, and we would take the highest number, which is when he died, which is 14 AD, and we'll subtract negative 63. And we know that in order to subtract, we're going to add the opposite. So 14 plus 63 equals 77 years. So he was 77 years old when he died. Which ruler lived the longest? So let's look at Tiberius. He was born in 42 BC, which is a negative 42, and he lived until 37 AD. So that would be 79. Find the number of years between Julius Caesar's birth and Augustus' birth. Negative 63 for Augustus and negative 100 for Julius Caesar. Negative 63 plus 100 is 37 years. How can you determine how long each of the 3 rulers, how long ago each of the 3 rulers were born? Add their birth year to the current year. This works because all 3 rulers were born BC. So if it's 2020, Julius Caesar was born 100 BC, be 2120. And obviously this slide was made in 2019, minus 100, or add the opposite, 2119. Augustus, 2019 to negative 63, or minus negative 63, 2082, and Tiberius would be the youngest at 2051. Additional examples. Find 2 minus 15. So if we add the opposite, it's 2 plus a negative 15, and that equals negative 13. Find negative 13 minus 8. So if we add the opposite, we get negative 13 plus a negative 8, and we get negative 21. Find 12 minus negative 6. 12 plus 6, 18. Find negative 21 minus a negative 8. So it's going to be negative 21 plus the opposite, which is 8. And we get negative 13. Algebra, evaluate g minus h if g equals negative 2 and h equals negative 7. So g minus h, we'll plug in the negative 2 for g and negative 7 for h. So we get negative 2 minus a negative 7. And then if we add the opposite, we get negative 2 plus 7, which is 5. And then number 6, in Mongolia, the temperature can fall to negative 45 degrees Celsius in January, and the temperature in July may reach 40 degrees Celsius. What is the difference between these 2 temperatures in Mongolia? So if we subtract the lowest number from the highest number, the highest is 40 degrees Celsius because it's above 0, it's a positive number. And the lowest is negative 45, so 40 minus a negative 45. And then we add the opposite, so we get 40 plus 45, and there's an 85-degree difference between negative 45 and 40 degrees. So there's your homework. If you could go over to Google Classroom and submit it there, and have a great night. I will see you next class.